Hello and thank you for joining me on this cold and rainy winter Sunday afternoon for a review of The Reassembled Man by Herbert D Kastle, a book I thoroughly did not enjoy and which I helped the Elusive Exclusive Book Society discuss to its detriment extensively this morning. Welcome back if you were here, if you watched me on that occasion. Welcome if you didn't. So Herbert D Kastle was a guy that you can't find too much about on the internet. He was a United States, USA author, born in the 20s, possibly 24, died in 1987, everyone seems to agree. Now, from everything that I've read, Kastle, which is Herbert David Kastle, didn't, in fact, write science fiction generally. He became quite famous outside that genre, and he has a lot of books from another genre, which is your basic standard fiction, which I don't read very much of anymore. I used to read pretty much anything, and if all you had was a book full of dames and broads and money and cars and etc., I was there for that book. I'm less so these days. And I didn't expect that that's what I was getting. I think it's fair to say that anyone seeing this cover may expect a little bit of science fiction. Also, maybe some body dysmorphia, because I've got to say no human on earth actually has muscles that resemble target practice with bow and arrow. However, on the back, the description is: the druggish simply disassembled Edward Burner. Tissue by tissue, nerve by nerve, in tanks they stored the million remnants and shreds that had been Burner. And then they changed his brain into a fantastic recording device, and they put him back together. And they put him together better. Is anyone else getting shards of Steve Austin, $6 million man? We can rebuild him, gentlemen. Well, the druggish are giant alien space beetles, essentially. And they rebuilt Edward Burner, the most uninspiringly unappealing individual that you can imagine written. Now, the Space Beetles. I was there for the Space Beetles. As who was it said I was always there for the Space Beetles? Well, I am. And I thought this was science fiction, and I expected more. However, reading up on Herbert D Kastle, who was apparently instrumental in Hollywood in making those movies that we all watched once, cars exploded, women wore stilettos and not much else. Money was around. They were all very formulaic, and I have never read anything else by Kastle. I expect that his books are very formulaic. Among them are such gems as one called Hot Prowl. Another one is called Millionaires. Apparently that got turned into a Hollywood movie. And another title is One Thing on My Mind. Gee, I wonder what that one thing was. I can make some guesses, having read The Reassembled Man. So we start with Ed Burner. He is a vain, narcissistic, self-obsessed. He has been called ordinary. I don't think it's ordinary to be that deficient in moral outlook. I think it's subordinary. I think there was something wrong with Ed Burner to begin with. He was married to a woman that he didn't like, and he'd married her basically because he wanted a housekeeper and someone he could have sex with on a regular basis. He makes this very clear at the beginning. He's dissatisfied with his life because he is just amazing and he never gets everything that he's deserved. He's one of those characters who is perpetually unhappy. 2,000 people could have the life that Ed Burner had, with the wife, the house, the kids, the job, and be perfectly happy and content. They may not be 100% happy with their marriage. They may not be delighted with their boss, but they're happy overall. They take happiness where they can get it. Not Ed Burner. He takes dissatisfaction from everything. And then one night, he goes for a drive and drives thousands of kilometers for 3 days. 3,000 kilometers springs to mind, though I think this is in miles, to New Mexico. He lives in New York. Now, I've got ephemeral notions of this distance, but looking at a map, it's significant. He drives non-stop for 3 days, not stopping to sleep, eat or drink. And when he gets there, he discovers that he is the subject of mind-control alien beetles that have forced him to go there. They forced him to drive for 3 days in order to offer him a proposition. They will fulfill his deepest dreams as long as he agrees to become a recording device for humanity, which the space beetles will then regularly record the information out of him. And he never stops to ask how that might happen, which is a failing of Ed Burner, but Ed Burner is quite stupid. And that means basically disassembling him, like the back of the book says, reassembling him and sending him on his way. If you or I were offered fulfillment of our greatest dreams, I feel that Ed Burner's choices would not be ours. Now, if you are male, maybe you would want the longest schlong in existence. But I think most people are sent by, I think he's nearly 40. By that stage, they may be sensible enough to realise that that isn't the case. Anyway, the Dragon rebuild him. He's going to live for a couple of 100 years if nothing terrible happens to him. Nearly anything terrible happening to him, he can survive. He's got this incredibly long ham, and he's incredibly strong, which he discovers when two guys try and mug him, and with a mere slap of his hand, he pretty much smashes one of these big beefy guys to the ground. He later discovers that they've changed his mind so he can sort of use mind rays to control other people. Like, no, Ed, I don't want to go to bed with you. Zoom. Falling into the sack. Advertising agency. You are going to accept our proposal for your whiskey. Whatever. Unlikable character do unlikable things. Now, I don't mind unlikable characters, but Ed Burner is essentially despicable. And the problem with that, the real problem with that, comes at chapter 11 in the first paragraph, where the author writes, where is that 11th paragraph? Oh yeah, chapter 11, which is page 173, by which you have been tormented with this book for 170 odd pages. Hang on. Angry Bird. There you go, Angry Bird. Go away and be angry somewhere else. No? Okay, stay here and be angry. Whatever. Chapter 11. Edward Burner was not a very lovable person during the early weeks of September. So this guy who's raped numerous women, it's a very rapey book, warning, content warning, etc. Done horrible things to everyone because he could. This is the first intimation that the author actually thinks that he's lovable through most of this book, and that is severely disturbing. Basically, the first 100 pages of this book is Ed having sex with people, often who are married, usually who usually don't want to, a couple of whom are underage, using his mind control to do that, dominating and subduing men who'd previously he'd seen as more dominant than himself. Horrible stuff. Now, briefly at page 50, I did think that maybe the author was trying to be humorous about things, but I don't think so. I think he took himself entirely seriously, and this whole wish fulfillment of a morally underdeveloped human being is meant to be serious. So, on page 44 is the quote that told me that I really wasn't going to be having a good time anytime soon with this book. I'd already suspected it, but now I was certain. So Ed Burner's been rebuilt by the Beatles. He's driven back home to his wife, who doesn't much like him. I agree, Edith. You should not much like him. He's reintegrating himself into his life. And I forgot to mention that the Beatles wiped his memory. He's got no idea why he drove to Mexico or what happened to him there. He's just suddenly emerged as having a full head of hair instead of the thinning hair, muscles out the wazoo, and the long dong. He hasn't quite figured out about the mental powers at this point. However, he gets home and he goes to bed with his wife. And the next day, I'm sorry guys, I've got to read this aloud. He wearied of her after the 5th time, rising as she wept with gratitude for her climax. I mean, sure, this was written in 1962, but how embarrassing is it that anyone can write that with a straight face? How embarrassing is it that many publishers, including this Australian one, decided to republish this steaming pile of hotspurs, especially when you realise that the previous page, 43, she had said, "No," she said, and grew still. "I mean it, Ed." But the next page, she is weeping with gratitude for her orgasm. Anne Bishop, in her Dark Jewels trilogy, I think it was, actually has one moment where she beautifully ridicules this style of writing where people weep with gratitude for their orgasm, or men's penises weep in gratitude for whatever. It's quite horrific, but it wasn't uncommon in the 60s-ish, plus minus a decade. So this comes across as your classic deal with the devil situation. Ed was too stupid to ask the druggish when they'd want him back or what he was meant to do. He just goes off and enjoys living the life of his dreams. There are a couple of poker games, and I'm sorry, guys, anyone watching this, I'm sorry if you enjoy the game, but I find poker monumentally boring, and the only thing more boring than playing poker is reading about people playing poker. Even if Ed gets to beat up the people he was playing poker with afterwards and steal all their money, still an incredibly tedious sequence. And of course he always wins at poker because he's now a Superman, a Beatles Superman. So around about page 130 it was, I think something finally happens. But that's after 100 pages of only 3 things happening. Ed eating phenomenal amounts. It's enough to make a mukbanger green with envy instead of green with eating too much. He eats 15 hamburgers at a time, drinks quarts and quarts of milk. I'm not sure what a quart is, but I think it's half a litre. Anyway, he does that. He does a lot of sex, and he does a lot of mind control and intimidating men. It's like, I want those moments of my life back. However, I did buy this book. I actually put it forward to the club to read for the group read, and I have now read it. I got through it without skim reading. I am very proud of myself. I will never do that again. Not for this book, anyway. Not for this author either. So around about page 130, we find out that the Beatles summon him back to New Mexico, and he has to go. They take control of his mind. Off he goes. It ruins this amazing advertising deal that he'd been setting up, and it all just falls through, which is fine. I don't like Ed, and I didn't want it to go through. But how worrying is it that Herbert D Kastle thinks that the most fun thing you can do with super normal powers is become an advertising agent? That's what you're going to do? That's the life of your dreams? What is wrong with you? He goes back to the druggish. They steal his memories again. We see the Beatles again briefly, but not enough to make it worthwhile. They send him on his way. Then it happens again. More advertising deals. And the cincher. The reason why you should not read this book, you should not pay money to acquire this book, and you should not submit to the incomprehensible lack of enjoyment of reading this book, is the ending. So it comes across as one of the deals with the devil type scenarios, where at the end the person who has made the deal with the devil, bad things happen to them. And for the first part of the book, I was waiting for that. I was expecting that deal with the devil to work well. Then I realized I no longer cared. I didn't care what happened to Ed at all. I didn't want to see bad things happen to him. I just didn't want to see him anymore. But I kept reading. At the end, he is rewarded for all the horrible shit that he has done. There is no deal with the devil. The Beatles go away. They take away the compulsions. And he goes off to have a wonderful life with the 18-year-old that he subdued with his mind and who is now in love with him. And this is a serious pass the bucket book. Whether you like science fiction or not, I don't think it really glides into the science fiction regime. Whether you like that particular type of mainstreamy 60s, we love money, I guess you'd call it, type fiction. Whatever your flavor of reading is, I don't think this is it. And yet, I find on Goodreads, many people did read it. There are many people that actually gave it multiple stars. So, maybe don't listen to me. Maybe get it out of the library before you commit to this thing. But there's a lot of 3 and 4 star reviews out there for this book. Take mine with a grain of salt if you think you're going to enjoy this rapey yet strangely well written book. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Like, comment, subscribe. Do algorithm things if you want to. But comment if you have read this book and liked it. Because have I got a psychologist for you?